I'm gonna go out on a limb. I feel like we probably all dominated gym class.
Yeah, oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
First
Thought
pick.
so.
Always.
Always.
Dominated gym.
Yes.
You guys, it's really great to be with you today. Spend a little time talking about your histories, my history, given that it's a big year, the 50th anniversary of Title IX being passed. So thought it would be fun to sit down and talk a little bit about, how you guys got into sports, why you got in, and then kind of see where it goes from there. So maybe we should start with the oldest.
Who's that?
Let's do it.
It's you.
I'm sorry.
Finally, I can push that off.
There you go.
Right.
I think for me, we were just talking about this before, I was a tomboy, like, out of the womb. I was very active, very into sports. I think it started off with riding bikes in the neighborhood and climbing trees and doing all those things. And then as quickly as possible, my mom got me into all the sports. So I basically tried everything when I was little. It came very naturally. And that's kind of like the quick story of it. I always had the opportunity. I'm sure we'll get into that with the Title IX part of it. But I was very lucky. I always had the opportunity. It was always available to me, whether it was actual teams, camps my mom got to put me in, that kind of a thing. And it was love at first sight. What can I say?
So you started pretty much, you were 5 years old on team sports. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, team sports,
Well,
that's more of like second grade, I think, is when like the local CYO intramural leagues kind of kicked off, both for soccer and basketball are like my two main ones, and track actually. So like, yeah, probably like second grade. But yeah, maybe as early as 5, 6 with track. I have like a memory of that, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? Long time ago.
How about you, Bri?
Very similar to Sue, tomboy, out on the playground with the boys, playing everything, football, basketball, Foursquare, whatever.
Foursquare.
Tetherball. Yeah, but similar, just started, through elementary school and then started with organized team stuff around 3rd grade. Started with basketball, and my parents also got me involved in everything from softball, soccer, basketball, did a little bit of volleyball, and ran track through high school. So yeah, and like Sue said, always had the opportunity to, pursue anything that I wanted to, which was nice. So
That's awesome. Well, I wasn't a tomboy. I was always the super girly one, so that's not similar for me. But I always played with boys too. Like I always played sports, but I started late. I started in the 7th grade. And I only started because I was tall. So like everywhere I went, I was 5'11" when I was 11. I just feel like I just started because everybody's like, you're so tall, you should play sports, you should do this. And I was just, at that time, I was just like, I don't want people sweating on me. I don't want that. Like I was super girly. But then when I started, I was in 7th grade. My dad kind of had me like you guys. Like I played every sport. I played softball, I ran track, I played volleyball. I was super athletic, and I never had an issue joining a team either. I mean, obviously I started late, but I always was able to play and have equal opportunities when I did.
I'm gonna go out on a limb. I feel like we probably all dominated gym class.
Yeah, oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
first
Thought
pick,
so.
always.
Always.
Dominated gym.
Yes.
But did you guys play on girls' teams? But I mean, it seems like you did a lot with boys also. Is that
Oh,
true?
yeah.
And was that because there weren't as many girls, or?
To be honest, the only time, so there was one time where, like I'd said, I'd started intramural soccer, but then there was like a travel soccer team, right? Like I was getting, let's call it 4th grade, and I was getting like more serious, 4th grade
Right.
serious, take
Yes.
that for what it's worth. But it was getting more serious, and my town didn't have a girls travel team. So I had to play on the boys team for like 2 years. And then I got like noticed by another town next door and got like recruited over to the girls team. But that's like, so that's really the only time though, where I have a story where, oh, the girls team wasn't available to me. But I think as it pertains to playing with boys, that was more like in the park, in the
Right,
neighborhood, down the
exactly.
street, not like in
Yeah.
the organized way. That I always had girls teams, except for that one moment.
Well, I had a moment where I was playing flag football. I literally played everything, and they didn't have a girls team for that. So I definitely was with that, like in that with probably like 4 other girls, but the whole league was like all boys. I was a kid, but they didn't have flag football for girls, and we were like, I'm fast. I can be wide receiver. Like throw me the ball. I used to run and catch him like 50-yard passes, but that was the only reason why I did flag football, like because I had to be with boys. But it was only because it was an offer for girls, but. It was fun. I was getting catches.
What about you?
I was a junior in high school when I saw rowing for the first time, and I really didn't like boarding school. And any chance I got to like leave campus, I would leave campus. And I had a friend who had just started college in Princeton, and he called me up like in in October, and this must have been 1974. And he said, "Hey, there's the head of the Charles coming to Boston on the Charles River. You know, come see it." And I'm like, "What is the head of the Charles?" And it turned out that it was this 3-mile rowing race where you have different events and you're racing against the clock. And I had never seen rowing. I didn't know anything, but I got to leave campus. Mm-hmm. So I left campus for the day and went and watched this. And I just sat there watching these boats go by, and I was far away enough that I couldn't see anyone's faces, so I didn't realize how much pain they were in.
Exactly.
I just thought, oh my God, it's so beautiful and it's so calm, and I want to do that. And I don't remember seeing any women on the river that day, although there were some, not many. And I just decided then and there, if I go to a college where there's rowing, I want to try the sport. But then I started rowing my freshman year, so that was the fall of '75. And right away, it became fairly apparent that there was a big discrepancy between the men's and the women's programs. All the freshmen, the men's and the women's, started rowing in the same place. You had to run about 2 miles to this little tiny piece of watery sludge. And that's where we rowed in the fall. But as soon as we went indoors, because back east in the winter, the river used to freeze, so you had to get off the water, and you would just do these brutal indoor workouts, running. Our gym, I think, was 13 or 14 stories high. We would run the stairs in the gym. We would row. They had tanks where you would row indoors, and obviously a lot of weightlifting. And there were 3 sets of indoor tanks, and we would go into the men's tank to lift weights. And that was when it started. That was when you'd walk in and they would tell you, "What are you doing in here? These are our weights. You don't have a right to be here." And we had a very feisty captain who was about 5'5", really quite small for a rower, but you did not want to mess with her. And so basically I would go in with her, and they'd look at her and they'd say this, and she'd say, "Last I checked, we spend the same amount of tuition as you do, and we have a right to do this." And they would just, kind of back off, but it was very uncomfortable. And then in the winter, we got to start, when the water broke, or the ice broke, it was February. And this was 1976 now, first time that women's rowing was in the Olympics. And this was right after Title IX. Title IX really made a huge difference in the number of sports that started opening to women. By 1988, there were a huge number of sports that were added for women in the Olympics. But we had 2 women who had been on the 1975 national team and who had won a silver medal in Nottingham, and they were training for the Olympics. One of them was that captain, Chris. So that time of year, you now get to go to the real boathouse, which is about 12 miles from campus. So everybody would meet in the late afternoon, men and women together, and we would ride out on these school buses. So we'd all get out there. The men would go into their locker rooms and change their clothes. Well, we would come in our gear because we didn't have locker rooms. And that was really okay before practice. There was this tiny little bathroom. If you needed to use the bathroom, you could use that at the back of the boathouse. You go out to practice, you sweat, and then it's snowing maybe, or raining. And then you also get a lot of backsplash from people's oars. So you come back and you are pretty much soaked. And then that's when the fun began, because the men would go and shower, and we would go and sit on the bus for 25 minutes waiting for the men.
Oh, hell no.
Then we would ride back 25 minutes. And then, we would go to dinner, because there was only one dining hall kept open for us, because it was now 7 o'clock at night. So that was where the discrepancy really started to show up. And the university, they knew that we didn't have facilities, so they tried to rent these portable locker rooms. And there were these tiny things, and there were like 30 of us, and they'd fit like 8 people, but they didn't get the right variance or whatever from the town of Derby to plug them in, so they were just standing in the parking lot. And even though they weren't being used, the guys started writing epithets on them. So they wrote "inhuman scum." What? Yeah, they wrote "cracks." I mean, it was really bad. One of those days on the bus, our captain was talking, we were all hanging out and talking. That was one of the good things about it, is all the women on the bus would sit there and hang out for half an hour and just talk. And
Like have fun or like talk about not being able to shower?
both.
Okay.
Both. And by the end of February, what was
Definitely
happening?
complaining.
I'm
Right.
like, I
Definitely complaining.
What do we do?
I would have
Exactly.
been like, this
Talking
is
about not being able.
No,
this
exactly.
is crazy.
So this was when I learned about Title IX.
No, I'm like, it couldn't have been me. I would have been like, are you serious? Like, I would have got off the bus for the team. Like, we need to get in that shower.
Well, I think your attitude shows some of the progress that we've
Yeah.
made. It's
Mhm.
one of the
Exactly.
things
That's
I
true.
love
That's true.
about being part of the W is just getting to see how the athletes, you guys have changed how you see yourselves and where you belong in the culture of sports. And for me, that's a huge sign of progress. But first, I had to be educated that it wasn't fair. I mean, look,
Right.
I was a white girl,
Right.
grew up in New York City, Upper East Side, went to private schools. The definition of privilege, okay? Never been discriminated in any way that I was aware of, other than, of course, my father making fun of me. But that even didn't register. That was my dad, right? So this was a really eye-opening experience. And sitting on the bus, that was where I learned about Title IX, especially because our captain and her compatriot, a junior, who were training for the Olympics now, were starting to get sick. And you guys know what happens, right? You get sick. It's like the kiss of death. You can't afford to do that. So they really started talking to us about, we should do something. So it started out kind of like a joke. Oh, we should take a bucket and a bar of soap and a sponge and go into the assistant athletic director's office. This was Joni Barnett, and pretend to take off our clothes and take a shower. And it went from that laughing and joking to one of them, Anne, saying to Chris, I dare you. And all of a sudden, like, game on, right? So Chris was like, okay. Okay.
Yes.
I love it.
So we ended up putting together this protest. Remember, I was 17 years old. I was a freshman, so I was a dutiful follower, and I loved my captain. She was incredible. I would have done anything for her. But in early March of that year, she called the Yale Daily News, and they sent a reporter who was also a stringer for the New York Times, the only guy who ended up being in the room, and a photographer. And 19 of us met in the locker room. It wasn't our locker room, it was a woman's locker room. And we took off all our clothes, we wrote Title IX in Yale blue ink on our backs, and we put on our very fancy cotton sweats, our team issue sweats, the only thing we got, sweatshirt and sweatpants, and we went trotting up to the administrative offices. And Chris had made an appointment with Joni Barnett. Joni thought that one person was coming, and in walked all of us. And she ended up like standing up instead of just sitting there. I think she got a sense that something was up. And there was no bucket, there was nothing like that, there was just us. And even though it had been really funny up until that day, all of a sudden it didn't feel so funny anymore. It was like, wow, we're going up against this university. And so we got in there, and Chris was right in the middle of us, and she gave a signal, and we took off our clothes, and we all turned around, and she stood buck naked, standing right at Joni Barnett, and then started reading this statement. It started, these are the bodies that Yale is exploiting, and went on to really invoke the legislation and say, remind her that they were violating federal law. The only thing that Joni said was, right as we all took off our clothes, she pointed to the reporter and said, do you want this man in here? And Chris is like, be quiet. And he turned around. And so he was facing the wall and then just kept writing. But there was a photographer there, and there is a photograph of Chris kind of from behind, naked, and you can see the Title IX on her back, and she's reading. So we did that, she finished up, we put our clothes on, we left, and the next day, all hell broke loose. First of all, the athletic director called our coach in and said, why can't you control your athletes? But the paper, the Daily News printed the article, and it was printed in the first page of the second section of the New York Times, and then it was picked up by the AP Wire, and it went all around the world. So my best friend, who was on the team, her parents were stationed in Rome. Her dad worked for the government, and they read the article. I mean, it was everywhere. And then the phone call started to the president of the university. And Yale had only gone co-ed in 1969, so this is 76. The university was less than a third women at that point. Almost all of the alums were men, and that's who was calling and writing. And their comments ranged from, get those girls a shower, to, why did you ever admit women to Yale? And they built an addition to the boathouse the next year.
Nice.
Good.
Were you
So-
scared doing it?
You know, I think I was like too young and dumb to be scared. I was scared like right before, because it all of a sudden felt so solemn. And I hadn't really thought about what my dad was going to say.
Yeah.
But because of how quickly it unfolded to be that the university was in the wrong, we ended up actually looking really good.
Yeah.
So
Did you encounter like directly anybody who was negative about it, or anybody who was positive? Like, what did you encounter like in your to your face?
just the male rowers, the older guys, not our class. Our class of freshman guys were really supportive, and I think it shows some of the cultural shift that was starting, just being 4 years younger than the seniors, and also the senior men really sucked as a crew, like they lost every race, and we were good, and that of course pissed them off too. So it was mostly the guys who
That
would
were
be
negative.
negative to us, disparaging to our faces. You know, tell us you're good because you don't race anybody hard. You know.
It's always interesting to hear stuff like that because I want them to say out loud, I don't deserve to take a shower. Like, tell me to my face, like,
Yeah.
I don't deserve to shower after I just did exactly what you did. You know what I mean? That's the part that I feel like doesn't resonate with me. You know what I mean? Like, a person can sit here and see everything that I've done that's similar to them or exact to them, man or woman, whatever. And it's like, no, you should go sit on the bus and act. Like, I don't ever understand that.
But you know, I think, Jantel, one of the things that's different is the way you see yourself as an athlete and a person and what you deserve, and how I saw myself. Because back then, I wasn't sure that I deserved to be an athlete, and I wasn't sure that I deserved that stuff. I had grown up in a household where, you know, my dad had said to me, well, you're lucky when you go to college and graduate, you can get a job as a secretary, and guys can't do that. I mean, and I didn't realize until years later, like, what that really meant. And I had grown up where it was just a given that boys got to do what they wanted and girls didn't. It didn't mean that I necessarily thought I wasn't going to go to college, but when push came to shove in situations like this, the status quo was, yeah, guys get to do it, and you little thing, you know, okay, but we're really wasting our money and wasting our time on you. That was the attitude. So,
Have the babies.
yeah,
Cook the food.
exactly.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
Be the secretary.
yeah.
It just blows my mind just thinking about it like that. You know what I mean? But it was normal for you, and it felt normal. Like,
Well,
it felt wrong, but it felt, you know what I mean?
I think this is really where I got, what I say is I got radicalized in college, because I went in, I think, largely unconscious about this until I then confronted it. But it was really because of this upper class woman who said, this is wrong. And so she was able to identify what I was feeling, because she was feeling the same way. And by the way, all the other women on the team were feeling the same way. So you kind of had this community, right? So she put a name to how I was feeling and said it's wrong. And then she pulled out this thing and said, oh yeah, by the way, there's a federal law
Exactly.
that makes this illegal. And that was like, wow. And then I think just the experience of being discriminated against and feeling like how terrible that felt, and and at that point then, how wrong it felt. I started thinking about all the other ways that people are discriminated against in the world. And that really changed my life. Like, that was the most important part of my education. And I went to an Ivy League school, and that was the most important part. It really made me into a very different person and changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do in my life and what I ended up doing. So
That's exactly what I thought about. I was like, imagine like the other part, like being black and a woman, you know what I mean? So that to me is like, I don't know, I'm just thinking about it in the sense of just simply being a woman, and then like that next layer of it, you know what I mean? But I can see how it can change because like we go out every day. I mean, you can add height, you can add skin color, you can add athlete, you can add all of that, and it's just always like this fight, you know what I mean? So I'm glad. I think that that's great, like that you can understand in the sense of like other areas, like you mentioned, like you can understand how getting discriminated against can feel like crazy.
Oh yeah,
And
it's just
bad and
wrong,
horrible.
just pretty much wrong. And in fact, it's I would not be a WNBA owner if it weren't for that whole thing.
Wow.
So yeah, for me, sports changed my life, and obviously for you guys, it changed your life. And when I got the opportunity, and it was really Don Trudeau who put together the three of us as an ownership group, and this is our 15th year of being owners. The reason I wanted to do it was I figured the WNBA was a place where you could actually generate social change in the name of sports. And if we could just get one group of women, you know, one sport established where women could do what they love, have the same right as men, you know, to earn a living doing sports, well, that would be a huge step forward. And, you know, it's not like the WNBA wasn't established when we came around in '08, but still, you know, you guys know, you got to invest to build any kind of business. So what I always say, and of course I love now that we're going to have a practice facility, like a physical space, but our team, our franchise lives at the corner of business, sport, and social change. That's what the W is about. That's what the Storm is about. And for me, I know everyone always wants to have the owners on this side and the players on this side. You know this. But for me, I don't view myself as an us versus them, because I'm here because I want the best that we can provide for our players. And that means that the league has got to be successful financially so that we can pay players, but also so that owners can sell their teams. Mm-hmm. Because if you can't sell your team in the future, right, that means it's just a hobby, right?
It does.
That thing that happened to me in 1976, all those years ago, from Title IX, I wouldn't be here with you guys today if it weren't for Title IX. And probably you wouldn't be here either.
Right, that's true.
So it's more invisible for you.
Yeah.
But it's really true. So I know when I found out about Title IX, but what about you guys? Do you remember like finding out about it or learning about it, or was it just part of the background and it never really became a topic of conversation in your growing up? So it would be like high school or college, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, luckily for us, we didn't really need to know about it because we had the opportunity from, you know, when we were born. But I'm kind of embarrassed to say it was my rookie season in the league when I actually looked into Title IX, and it was due to Lynn Dunn, who was our coach at the time. And in training camp every day, she would give us a topic to research, and then the next day give us like a pop quiz before we started. And one of the times was Title IX, and so we had to do research on it. And that was the first time I looked into it and became aware of, you know.
But you know, in a way, Briann, it shows the success of the law. I mean, my daughter is probably a little younger. Well, she's a little younger than you. She's and she started playing soccer when she was 5, and she played D1 soccer the whole time in college. And she found out about Title IX because of me, but not because of anything in her life that mandated it. So it shows, you know, I think that's one of the victories, is that girls grow up today thinking, well, why wouldn't you do sports? So how about you?
I would say I heard about it like around in my sophomore year of college, but like Bree, I'm similar. Like I didn't really start to kind of delve into it until I got into the league and understand it a little bit more. But I never had an issue either just joining sports. So it's like it's not something that we're directly affected by, but like it's important because we actually can play. You know what I mean? So I think that's why I was more interested in it, is because people have had times where they couldn't play a sport or it wasn't available to them, and you just kind of want to almost like look back and see like who paved the way, like what was in place, so that we would be able to have these, you know, ample opportunities to join many sports that weren't available to people like even during your childhood. So for me, I don't know, that's why I was interested in it, but like we keep saying, and it didn't really affect us as much. Yeah. But college.
Yeah, same. I didn't really know life without Title IX, in that I always had the opportunities to play. I'm trying to think like the first time I heard about it. I don't know that I can pinpoint. I do remember being in college and there was like flyers around campus for women to join the rugby team. That's actually my first introduction to it. Was like seeing that people were trying to have a women's rugby team and hearing guys complain about it. That's one of my first introductions. But very similar. Didn't really know life without it. But from that moment is something I remember, and I think I want to say that's when I first started learning about what Title IX was. But otherwise, I didn't need to know what it was.
Right.
Opportunity was there.
And in college, your teams were pretty much on par with the men's teams in terms of the facilities and everything else?
Yeah.
Some like our men's team was sponsored by LeBron, because if he would have went to college, he would have went to Ohio State. But I feel like no, ours was a little bit different when it came to like gear and some of the things that they were able to get. Like it was definitely a little bit of a discrepancy there.
And was there tension between you and your men's team?
Not really. It was more towards like the equipment, you know. I'm like, if LeBron's gonna, like, give me some LeBrons. Like he would just always say no. Like the LeBrons are for the men's team, and I was like, well, we're all Ohio State athletes. I don't understand how he can just sponsor the men's team. But that was the only real discrepancy, like the shoes, the gear, like all the stuff that they would get versus us. I'm like, I'm seeing them walk out with like crazy tracksuits, and I'm like, where are ours? You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? Like, where are our great shoes? We were getting like, I don't know, some not knockoff Nikes. I mean, I like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But
Team
they weren't LeBrons.
Yes.
You know what I
Team
mean?
shoes,
So
Yeah, team
And
shoes.
what was how did it make you feel?
I was salty. I mean, that's I was mad, like, cause I always would ask him. You know what I mean? And I was great at Ohio State, so I would be like, can you slide me a pair of LeBrons? He would be like, no. Like the answer was flat out no. All the time. Like if I would ask for extra anything, it would just be like the men's team were coming out with all this like crazy stuff. I mean, LeBron would come and visit them, and I'm like, we're in a locker room down the hall. You know what I mean? Like, throw us a couple pairs of shoes, make a women's shoe. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's probably the only thing I saw in college, and I was really like, I was upset about it at the time, but I didn't spend too much time on it. But at the time, I was pretty upset.
Okay, so we're 50 years in. Okay, I was alive when Title IX was passed. I know you guys weren't. But what do you see? If you could like project forward, not just for the W, but for the culture as a whole, how would you envision the next 50 years going that would make you feel like we've really made progress from where we are today?
That we don't have to have these conversations.
Right.
I mean, the thing about Title IX, obviously it's wonderful to celebrate it, and obviously people like yourself, for those that don't really know a life without it, there's a gratitude that you have to keep going and pass on these stories. But at the same time, what makes me sad is that we have to constantly remind people about Title IX, that it still has to exist at all. Like we still need the actual federal law to hold people accountable. And I'm always blown away by like the fact that it can be as simple for women and for women in sport. It can be as simple as one person in a room who like didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So like your AD in this situation, right? This was just one. It was a man.
No, she was a woman.
Not the woman, but
Oh,
the
no,
the
yeah,
athletic
the AD
director.
was a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just this one guy who like didn't follow the law, and nobody held him accountable for. At that point, I understand it was only like 5 or 6 years old, right? Title IX was.
Yeah.
I'm like, what year was it?
That's
Okay,
right.
yeah. So it was like fairly new-ish, but the fact that the NCAA in 2020 had to be held accountable in these ways, like that to me is always mind-blowing that it's like that flimsy. Yet at the same time, I guess it's also encouraging that it can change, right? Because all it took was one TikTok video.
Right.
God, imagine if there was TikTok when you were in college. That would have been wild.
Everywhere,
That
yes.
reporter wouldn't have been turning his back. But yeah, so I guess my point is, like, what I would love for the next 50 years, or if we sat down in 50 years to have this conversation, is that we don't even really have to talk about it. Like, people are held accountable and or don't even need to be held accountable because they're just doing what they're meant to be doing, which is obviously kind of under that umbrella of equality. So that's kind of what I hope.
I love that. Mine's is the pay gap.
Yeah.
I just like in 50 years, I just hope that we can kind of close that gap. I'm not saying that we'll get all the way there, but kind of bring us up in the pay area. But I second what Sue said as well.
No, you nailed it on the head,
Yeah.
honestly. Like that's
Yeah.
where we need to be.
You know, the thing about the pay gap is the pay gap exists because of the cultural bias against women, right? I mean, what are the big drivers that drive revenue for any sports franchise is tickets, but it's really media rights. Media rights and corporate sponsorships are the two big things. And actually that's starting to shift. The corporate partnership piece is starting to shift in the W because we really actually have a unique brand and companies are starting to see it. But there's a lot more to go. Something like 4% of corporate sponsorship money goes to women's sports. And then you look at the really big issue, which is media rights. And for me, you know, you can point to the media, you can point to the league, but really it's human beings who have to start making choices of, I want to watch this, I want to buy tickets.
Yeah.
And it's the humans who have to start recognizing, wow, I have a daughter. If I want the world to be different for her, I
I'm
really
like,
need
those
to
people
start
have
changing.
moms. and
Right.
They have
There's
aunts.
there's
and they have
a woman in your
sisters.
life
That
somewhere.
I know.
You wouldn't be
honestly,
So from my perspective, that's what we need. Is my dream for 50 years from now, and I probably won't be around, maybe, is that the culture has shifted, and we just accept that humans are humans, no matter really what you look like, what your gender is, what your race is. If you have a dream, that we're going to do everything we can to support your dream, whether it's, you know, in sports or something else. So, but all the work that you guys are doing today, I have to say, I love that social media has given you guys your voices in a very public way, because all those naysayers, you guys always have great responses. And I'm always like, you go, all the things I never got to say or that I wasn't
we're
quick
lucky
enough
in
to
that
say,
way.
but you're doing it.
No, I know, but we're lucky because it's interesting we're talking about this now because I'm watching a show currently about kind of has an undertone of like women in the 60s, and I just read a book, 2 books actually, that like had an undertone of women. Totally different topics in all 3 things, but that there was like a vibe of that. And like you just didn't have a vehicle to be heard.
That's right.
Like it's this like, whether it's just like you're not getting the promotion, whether it's like you're not getting, you happen to see a pay stub for a guy doing the same job as you.
Right.
You literally had no vehicle to say anything. It was just one voice in this one room, and all the men in that room went, shut up.
Right.
Exactly.
And you had no, but now, and so we're lucky that we have social media. So I guess to kind of piggyback, the one thing I'm proud about our league is that we don't miss those moments anymore. And so, and we all have each other's back, which is really nice.
Yeah.
You never feel like it's just you doing it. You know, you have all these people behind you supporting it. But like we do use the platform well, I think, to call these things out. And of course, at the start, it's always people like trying to hush us. But now you like actually can't because of social media.
Yeah. No, it's a
Yeah, I
it's a
can't
big
imagine being muzzled like that.
Well, I mean, I still walk into boardrooms and notice the discrepancy between how men deal with the space of being in a meeting and how I deal with the space of being in a meeting. I mean, we still have a long way to go.
But that's why I feel like what I kind of like, again, piggyback on what I was saying before, those rooms are changing because of all the work that was done and is continuing to be. It's like those rooms are and when those rooms start to change, that's I think when we're actually going to see things like
It's
really change.
It's like when you were a freshman, when you were 17, with your captain, like she gave you that confidence to be like, yo, and the information and just to support you to say something and be a part of that whole thing. Like those rooms change and that you take up space, you speak your mind, and then things happen.
That's absolutely right. And it's frankly one of the reasons I love being part of the Storm organization, because we've created a space where you have so many women leaders. Obviously the whole team, you know, are women leaders, but we have our CEO, we have a lot of our leadership team, obviously the ownership group. So I didn't realize how important that was to me personally, except for every time I walk into that space, I just feel like, wow. I don't ever have to worry. And it's not like I consciously worry when I walk into a more diverse space with men. It's just I notice after the fact, I'm a little more guarded, and I'm very aware of the dynamic of if I want to speak up, how much work I'm going to have to do actually to speak up. It's different. So.
We're lucky. I feel like I'm always so thankful to be in sports because like we're just always surrounded by powerful women.
All
Like
the time.
my whole our whole existence being on team sports, you're just always surrounded by elite women. Like we're in the WNBA,
Yes.
that means you're elite, and we're surrounded by that all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like it's only when I'm removed from those locker rooms or teams or whatever that it's like, whoa, this is what reality is. What?
It's true.
Because like we're used to like
Right.
being competitive with each other and bringing out the best in each other and like all these things, and we function in this way where we're surrounded again by these elite people, and it's like when you're not treated the same when you exit that room, or when you see what's really happening, or when you see what happens to my sister, who used to be a lawyer, now she's like a legal recruiter, but when she tells me stories about what life is like for her, I'm like, what? That would never happen in our locker room.
Right. But you guys will bring that impatience of, you know, like, of this, what's happening out there is wrong with you into whatever spaces you choose to go in once you're done in the W. And you'll help just continue to foster change because it's that impatience and that just intolerance for a status quo that's wrong that forces everything to move. So, and the more of us that are out there fighting for that, the more quickly it'll happen.